Hello, everyone. It's Raquel again. We're here for the second episode of Safeguarding Our Children. It's an extended conversation from the Safeguarding Conference we had last week, called the Child Development Conference. Like I always say, thanks to Beyond the Classroom Foundation for hosting us and to the Mastercard Foundation for sponsoring this conversation. So we've had the first episode, we talked about home safety for children, which for me, I believe was the first place to start because of course, the children that go to school come from someplace. So we believe that is the home. So how can children be safe at home? That conversation was extensive. We wanted 30 minutes and we almost had 15 minutes. If you haven't watched it, please go back and watch the first episode as we run through the second episode, talking with Mr. Okeyinfu Ajayi about child safety in schools. So we also believe that children spend a lot of time in school, much more than they spend at home, if I would say. So, and I always say to teachers when I get to train teachers, during our safety savvy training, I spoke to a lot of teachers and I said to them, see, you have an honor. It's an honor for you to spend time with our children much more than we do. So it's on you to develop yourself, to make yourself better, to get trained so that you are able to, be a blessing and impact these children that you have the opportunity to impact. So the work that Mrs. Ronke Posh does and Mr. Okeyinfu Ajayi and every other person that's going to come on this show is very, very important to the total development of the child. So we're going straight up. Mr. Okeyinfu Ajayi has been my mentor, my big sister for so many years. If I remember, we just clicked like this. It was like 5 and 6.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it when I say to her, oh, thank you. She said, we're family, and my heart will just melt. So thank you so much, Cakes. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Thank you for loving her. And for everyone who doesn't know, she's my daughter's godmother, so you can imagine. So we are family. So yes, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself quickly. She's an educator. She also runs a school, and she's a strategist, an education strategist to be specific. And she does a lot of work in the education space. And so I'll allow her to introduce herself quickly, and then I'll shoot to the first question and to the last. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Raquel. It's always such a pleasure to have these conversations with you because your heart for children is huge and it is so big. So it's not just one tiny area you look at several different areas. And I'm really thankful to the Mastercard Foundation for recognizing that and for allowing you to extend these conversations that have been happening about safeguarding and child protection. My name is Okeyinfu Ajayi. I'm an education strategist. I'm also the founder of Busy Mind Center Limited. So I say that I am meant to change the world, and I truly believe that is my calling. Right now, I'm using the space of education. I'm also using the space of business, right? This conversation Raquel is having today is really important, right? Because if we as business people, education professionals, do not put the right policies in place, the right processes in place concerning safety holistically in our schools, then we'll keep having a lot of this safeguarding and child protection issues that are, that have been happening one too many, right? And so that's why I'm here, and that's why we're extending this conversation. And that's enough about introduction. Back to you, Raquel.
Okay, so I'm going straight up to the first question that we have here for Ms. Ajayi. And like I mentioned, our focus for this conversation is around school safety. So as a school owner and an experienced strategist in the education space, how can schools improve the response to abuse in the environment? So we believe that when children walking from the gate, they become the responsibility of the school. So how can schools now improve the response to abuse in their schools?
Absolutely, that's a fantastic question, really. And the first thing is, I would always say it starts from a place of awareness. If people don't know, they can't do, right? So when we say, how do schools improve safety? How do schools improve what response to abuse? They need to first of all understand what abuse is. The next thing, so it starts from an awareness of what abuse is, and then the next stage is then recognizing awareness in different children, right? And then the third stage is, okay, I know what abuse is, I recognize it, what do I do about it? When we go through these 3 stages, and then there's the do part, which is where our policies come in and our procedures for child safeguarding, we would find that people will be in a better position to actually stop abuse, and to actually ensure that abuse is not perpetuated. Because sometimes people do things like shouting at a child for no just cause or without the child even knowing what is happening. And that in itself is abuse, right? But then the child thinks it's okay for people to shout at me, and then they grow up with that sort of mindset. So the first stage, like I said, is those three. Once we do those three, then the responses will definitely pick up. They will be much better because people know what to do and they know how to recognize when things are not skewed properly. Another part very quickly is when abuse happens at home and the students bring it to school, because that also happens outside of the school environment. Something happens at home, and because the children are very comfortable with their teachers a lot of the time, more times than not, what would happen is children would talk about what happened to me at home today. My mommy hit my head on the table, my daddy beat my mommy. All of those things are also things that we need to look at. And then the same way we deal with abuse happening within the environment is that we need to also deal with it happening in the home environment and help the children understand what shouldn't be happening, deal with their psychological well-being, and then help the home understand that this is happening and this is how you need to safeguard your child in your homes. Yeah, so over to you.
Okay, so I'm very grateful for that response. So my next question is going to be tilted towards, are there specific trainings that the schools should get their teachers and the staff involved in around safeguarding and child protection? Or beginning of the term, we just bring the teachers together and tell them, see, these children are in our care, or do whatever you want to do to keep them safe? Or are there really trainings out there that are available that teach schools to enroll their teachers on and ensure that they get certified or some sort of training so that they're able to safeguard the children?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's several safeguarding trainings. Of course, I don't know if I can mention names here, but there's several people who handle safeguarding trainings or can point you in the right direction. I mean, there's the safety chief, for example. She does a lot of training. There's also there's this lady, I don't know her name very well now, but she also deals with safety training, and she does conferences every year as well. On YouTube, there's several safeguarding videos on YouTube as well. But beyond our safety and safeguarding policies, I think it's also important that schools teach their administrative staff, because guess what? A lot of these land on the desk of the admin team, right? Especially when we are hiring. And I believe that we'll probably go into that later in the conversation. Admin teams need to understand how to distinguish the right staff to hire. The right teaching or administrative staff is not just somebody that can do the job. How about in relation to how you deal with the children? So those sort of trainings are also really important. So yes, there are specific training issues, there are specific safeguarding issues. I live and I work within the Lagos State environment, and I do know that Lagos State has, and they're free, quite a number of child safeguarding and protection policy trainings that are online, which teachers can take and empower themselves in terms of understanding what safety issues exist and how to deal with it when they're dealing with children within and outside of the classroom environment.
Okay, so we are currently running the Safety Savvy project in partnership with the Mastercard Foundation, which this conversation is a part of. And so we had trainings where we had to go to schools to physically train teachers in schools around safeguarding and child protection. And most times when I walk into a school and I say we need to train your school staff, the first thing they do is they bring the teachers alone without the security personnel and the cleaning staff. And so, so my question now around the fact that a lot of trainings are targeted towards teachers around those in the admin, and the janitors who will not know how to measure the quantity of bleach and water, that if a child's apple falls off on that floor, the child could get hurt. Or the security who, when he starts to hear, oh, there's chaos outside, doesn't know what process to follow to quickly shut the gates and run in first and first find out what's happening, inform the school, doesn't understand the processes to follow. So what will be your suggestions to schools who are neglecting the janitors and the security men, for instance? What would be your advice and your suggestions to them regarding safety for their children in their school?
Yeah, so for every single school who's watching this, you need to understand who your stakeholders are in terms of policies, right? And in terms of safety issues, who are your stakeholders? So yes, if you use the RACI, there's a RACI chart, who is responsible, who is accountable, who should be informed, and who should be seen. communicated with, right? Or what are the communications regarding safety issues? If you use your RACI chart, and you can go online and check what RACI is, RACI, it would very clearly show you who the stakeholders are. And it will help you understand who exactly you should bring in into safety issues. Also, one thing I would say to you is that section your school. Entry, exits, within the classroom, within admin, after school, section your school in that way and put your stakeholders in those spaces as well. It then helps you understand very clearly who the people are who have direct relationship with children and indirect relationship with the children, right? Indirect engagement with the children. Now, when you're looking at safety and safeguarding issues as well, we should not forget the adults in the classroom, the adults within the school system, because they're also part of the safety issues. If me as a teacher or admin staff feels unsafe, it is very likely that I might project those my safety issues, either because the parent came and shouted at me or my boss screamed out at me and I'm shaky and I may not then, in terms of decision making, I'm not making the right decisions. And that in itself can impact safety negatively in the environment. So we shouldn't just think about safety training in terms of, just safeguarding children. I believe very strongly that we should also look at safeguarding the adults within the environment as well, because those are very important. Yeah.
Yes, because that's actually our next question. So even going, I said that our guests are just amazing. I was saying that earlier. They're just amazing, because the next question was going to talk about how can we safeguard teachers, especially the teachers in the classroom, because we don't have. When we visited 6 schools in total for the safeguarding training for schools, and all the teachers, every single school had the same thing. Parents can stomp in and just scream and shout and say, oh, my child said this happened, my child said that happened, without verifying or even going through a process. And then the school will start pacifying the teacher, the parents, because they want to keep the parents and keep their money. Like, that's what the teachers were telling us. And so the parents are the customers, and they are not usually heard or seen. And when they're trying to say, oh, this child actually is not telling the truth, nobody listens to them. And so they get reprimanded for something that's not completely true. And so how can schools put policies in place that would safeguard their teachers? Because in doing so, they're safeguarding the children, especially the teachers.
Oh,
so where does the PTA come in also?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to leave the PTA for a little later because my views concerning the PTA are very different from a lot of people, but I will share it anyway. So the first thing that I would look at, what you said, parents just walking into the classrooms and gaining access to teachers, that in itself is a safety concern, right? And the school needs to look holistically at so child protection generally is part of safety, so then we need to look at it and say, what are the gaps? Because if any parent can walk in and scream at a teacher, it means that anybody can come in and carry a child and walk out. So we need to look at it holistically from those 2 perspectives, and so there needs to be a process which should be very clearly communicated to the parents. If you're unhappy about something, this is how you handle it, right? And there's something that Richard Branson said. He says, I take care of my team because I know that my team will take care of my customers. And so schools and institutions, generally speaking, need to understand the fact that they cannot do the work by themselves. And so the team that they have put together to do the work, they need to be protected. Now, child issues are very sensitive issues, right? If I feel that my child is unsafe in any way, of course, it doesn't mean that I should become an animal, and just jump and just do things with a lack of discipline. But if I have a process that guides me, it makes it easier, And we as educators also need to be very alert. Right? If a parent comes in and they're upset about something, that's one stage of it. But you know what? They came in upset because something happened within the classroom and it wasn't communicated on time to the home front. Now you might say, oh, but it was just one small thing, but we know if you're trained enough, which is why your last question about training is so critical. If we're trained enough, we would know when a child is unhappy about a certain action that happened within the classrooms or on the playground or when you're walking into school, and realize the fact that this child can go home and say something that may not be 100% correct. but it is based on their perspective, because children see things, very differently from the way we adults see it. So the teacher at that point, again, which is where communication comes in. Remember that racing chart? We need to say, what are our communication frameworks and how do we quickly send the message home to say, oh, this happened in class today. Your child wasn't particularly happy about it, but this is why it happened. And we're happy to have this conversation with you. You have sent that message home already before the child goes home and says something. So it is no longer new to the parent. The parent is actually expecting the child to say something when they come home, right? So we need to then say, which is why an awareness of what are safety concerns is so important, right? The way we see it is very different from the way a child will see it. But if we're more aware, first of all, because we have profiled our children and we understand what every student we can't do it 100%, but we kind of have an idea of how students think and reason certain things out. So that way, when something happens to student A, you're like, this child might likely do this. So let me do this. Yeah. So those are you can't do it 100% of the time or getting 100% of the time, but more often than not, we should be able to send a message home to the parents. And there should be a policy that says children, you can't do it in my school. You just can't just come and just be shouting at my team. It's not acceptable. I would personally have a conversation with the teacher, with the parent, and let them know this is not acceptable. Yes, I can see that you're upset. It is understandable that you're upset, but can we have a conversation so that things are clarified, right? And that's just it, and so we do need to protect our teachers. They do need to feel valued. They do need to understand the fact that their word means something, because they're you mentioned something right at the beginning of this conversation. You said teachers spend a lot of time with the student, except maybe on the weekend. So it means that if I'm spending more time with your child, there are things that I may know about your child that you may not necessarily see that part of your child. So there should be open communication between the home and the school, such that both parties feel appreciated, both parties feel heard, but most importantly, we must have processes that govern communication and engagement, especially complaints management, because that is something that would always happen within the school setting. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So I wanted to ask, my next question is still on this topic, but then there are application packets. So should schools have, like what you just mentioned, this process, something in the application packet that says to teach parents, this is how we are in the school. You cannot do this with our teachers. If there's an issue with your child, these are the processes that you need to follow. These are the steps you need to take to report. So that, and if you can't follow this XYZ, this is what needs to, we don't tolerate XY. So should application packets cover this area, so that when a parent comes to your school and they want to enroll their children and they get an application packet that they pay for, they should see what the school expects of them. Because there's so much of what the parents expect from the school, but most and the parents don't even know what the school expects of them. And that's why I was asking about the PTA, that says, if they say PTA, for instance, X amount of step by step, yes, how do you, that's my next question. Should that be the application packets and constantly discuss that PTA?
Yeah, I love that. It is important that we put those in our school communication. I'm not sure about the application packet, because what happens is that sometimes those application packets are not even filled out. Parents don't spend, from my experience, they don't spend a lot of time reading through everything, but it should be in the handbook. And it should be on whatever parent-school forums that happen, either via the PTA or via PTF, parents-teacher forum. Yes, so it should be something that is discussed, and it should be the same way we have a discipline policy. We should have a policy for the parents as well that safeguards their interaction with the school, their engagement with the school, and the school is holistic, right? So it is all the school team and then the school as a community. So parent to parent, parent to child, and stuff like that. There have been instances where parents say, oh, this person's child did this to my child. I want to see that child. And I'm like, no, you can't, So yes, there should be a written documentation, because you didn't read it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, So there should be written documentation. Parents should periodically be drawn, their attention drawn to that written documentation so that they know what it is. So a handbook of sorts that sort of lists out what we're about, like you mentioned, and our different policies, our child safeguarding policies. Of course, embedded in that is our discipline policy, our child protection policy, and of course, our communication policy regarding all of those sort of things. So yes, absolutely, it should be done.
Oh, thank you. I hope that schools that are watching us, if you don't have these policies in place, please hurry up and grab some, like we talked about during the conference. I remember the safety chief was one of our guest speakers during the conference last week.
Yes.
And she spoke extensively about the fact that a lot of schools don't want to train their teachers and they don't want to put up policies. Mr. Gideon Larewaju also spoke about school policies. Mr. Tarakin Lami spoke about school policies. I think school policies and processes just came up during the conference a lot. And if you haven't watched the conference, please go back and just keep watching it. But just 3 hours, binge on it like you binge on a movie and enjoy yourself. So we'll go right straight to the next question. It's about playground safety. Playground safety. My daughter came home and said, XYZ called the child's name, beats me on the playground. And then, and then that was sorted out. And then I said, oh, I hit my leg somewhere. I'm like, okay, so this playground is not safe. Or what's going on? So are there, policies that says the playground should be XYZ wide, or the swing should be XYZ, so that the specification, because then I went to the school, I realized that I should have seen that before. One of the swing is small, so they have to squash in to sit on it. And I was thinking, didn't you measure children to do this swing? So it could hurt the bum of a child, So are there specifications that will keep children safe, from these playground toys and things on the playground, especially in school? So even around swimming safety, and I mentioned that we'll talk about swimming safety tomorrow with when we're talking about water safety in school, but we talked about swimming safety earlier at home. So what about swimming and other activity in school? So playground activities in school, ballet, children being pushed hard to learn certain extracurricular activities so that the money that their parents are paying is showing. So I want to talk about all the extracurricular activity and playground safety for children.
So the reality is that it is impossible to safeguard children against everything, right? Part of it is them growing up. A 3-year-old is not so steady on her feet or his feet, and so when they're toddling around, they would fall. That's normal. Children also don't like to share, and of course, all of these sort of things are conversations they don't like to share, and so some of these things are just common sense. I'm sorry to put it like that, but that's what it is. And so you would see those sort of issues where another child will push another child, or so those would come up. However, what I have found is that a lot of teachers, and in some schools as well, playground time is almost like a rest time for the teachers, and that shouldn't be the case, right? You are at work during the playground. You are alert during the playground. There should be a ratio system in place on the playground. If your playground is not big enough, stagger your recess time such that classes come for recess at different times of the day. Your recess, instead of making it 45 minutes, make it 30 minutes, right? Or 25 minutes, so that 2 classes can come out at 2 different times of day, or 2 categories of learners can come out at different times of day. That way, we don't have 50 children on the playground. We can have 30 and 20 on the playground, which is easier to manage, right? So that's been said, and there should be policies around those things that says playground, and all of that is part of. So your child safeguarding policy is a huge document, really, but it's not so much the document, but the actions of the people. It is one thing to write it down, it's one thing to get it done, right? So those are things that, yes, that we need to look at. It's easy to write it down, but is it getting done? So part of the policies and the procedures should be in monitoring. If people are on the playground, who goes out to monitor that the playground equipment are being used in the right way? Who goes out to check that when the children are sliding down, there's somebody at the climbing stage and there's somebody on the sliding down phase? Those are things that should be put in place. And that is part of, honestly, I would like to call it common sense, but it is things that people should 100% understand that should be in place on the playground, right? It's also important to communicate really quickly. If a child pushed another child on the playground, nothing may come out of it in school. That's the thing with children, right? Their bodies may be absolutely fine in school, and then you just rub it and say, oh, sorry, maybe I apply a bit of ice and they're fine. But then they get home and that thing begins to swell, right? It's crazy. I've seen it happen, like even with my children as well. A million times it happens. Like, I wonder from where, which is why communication is so critical. Let the parent know this happened and this is what we've done, right? It is so important. But most importantly, teachers need to understand, what am I supposed to be doing on the playground? Where am I supposed to stand on the playground? There's somebody I used to work for, and she always used to say, Mrs. Ajayi, that as a teacher, you should have eyes around your head. literally. But because that is impossible, it then means that the way we position ourselves in certain areas, either in the classrooms or on the playground, should be such that the children are covered. I can stand in an area. If somebody else is with me, the person stands somewhere else. If I can look from the left to the right, the person should be able to look from the right to the left, so that my blind spots are not that person's blind spots as well. Those are things that we can't do on the playground. But to be honest, there's some things that would definitely happen. A child might feel that they're holding a swing properly and they're not, because they're chatting with another child, and they will fall. But should it be sorted out? Yes. So our health and safety policies should come in place in that regard. So there should be, so it's almost like your safeguarding policy should have so many different elements to it. It should cover recruitment of teachers. It should cover playground safety. It should cover health and but of course you have a health and safety policy, but a little part of it needs to be embedded within, yes, your safeguarding policy. I hope I answered that question.
Well, the second part of it is about extracurricular activities and
okay,
just pushing the children so hard.
Okay,
to really show the
so
parents
that is a mental. It's more of a mental well-being issue in that case. Let me give you an example. So today I had a meeting with my management staff, and we were talking about Christmas, and they said to me, some of the children don't want to do anything for Christmas. I said, hey, they have to. The parents will come on Christmas Day with their phones. They want to record their children. Are you saying they will see their children? But they're like, nah, the children don't want to. When we put them in the choir or in the dance, some of them were flat out crying. I said, maybe they said, no, ma. I'm talking about my year 3, my year 4, my year 5 students. So 9, 10 years. They're not young. And I said, they just want to sit down and watch their friends. I said, okay. I said, are you sure we cannot do this? We cannot do this. Let's bring out a debate. They were like, nah. They said they want to sit down and watch their friends. They don't want to perform. And I said, okay, that's fine. And they said, we actually communicated to some of the parents of these certain children that don't want to do anything. And their children and their parents are like, it's fine. If they don't want to do anything, leave them alone. And that's the thing, right? Like you mentioned, a school wants to always be on the good side of the parents. And they forget that your consumer is the child. If your consumer is not consuming, yes, the customers are the parents because they pay the money, but the consumers who we're actually giving the service to, who are direct consumers of our service, are the children. And we must always look at that. Sorry, I got a message. My apologies. We must always remember the children, right? And if we put the children in the center, we will make the right decisions. So yes, children should not be forced to do things. There's some children that is developmental. At a certain stage, then they're not ready for something. And then a few weeks down the road, they're ready for it. So let children be, right? But just communicate to the parents on time. Yeah, back to you.
Okay, that's not it. We still have one more question.
Oh,
yes. So usually I walk into buildings when I want to have trainings and all that, and people say, you are acting like you're one Uibo man. Well, for this one, you put like it's all white, because I always say, where's the muster point? Can you give us a drill or something? I put like, okay, what's this one? It's too much. But true. And even in schools, I mentioned we did a training for teachers, for staff in schools, and we went to schools. And for most of the school, when I say, what's your muster point? And they are probably looking at me like, okay, And so I want you to talk about evacuation drill, fire extinguishers in school. I know schools do all these sand piles, blankets. Schools have all those, safety measures that they put against fire. But do people really do these drills in case of an emergency? And what about keeping extinguishers in school until they're expired? Then the day you need it, you now realize that nothing is happening inside. So I want you to just try and bundle all that up around just little things in that schools should look out for, including that evacuation plan. So what happens if there's a fire? The child should know exactly what to do, not that they're jumping through the window trying to grab their school bags. So those little things. So if you can help us in maybe another 10 minutes, just explain to us what schools should look out for, these little things, smoke alarms in the classroom, anything that you think that is important that schools should look out for when they're putting their safety plan.
So the first thing is your exits. You should not have more than one exit out of the school premises. You may choose to keep one closed, but it should be free of clutter, so that in case you need to, utilize more than one exit, you have that exit available for you. It is also important in terms of we should have safety drills, and our safety drills should not just be fire. It should be flooding. It should be fire, of course. It should be cases of like things like kidnapping or shooting, riots, mob events, and those sort of things. So we should have those sort of drills, and we should carry them out periodically, at least once a term, that those drills should be carried out. In terms of the tools that we use for our drills, the children should see them and know that they're clearly marked. The staff should also understand what these are. Now, the purpose of the thing needs to be communicated clearly, which is why in anything that we're in anything, I see my network connection is unstable. I hope it's better now. In anything that we're doing, we need to be very mindful, very intentional about communicating it to the people who are going to be the foot soldiers that are doing those things. Let them understand the impact of not doing those things. When they understand the impact, it's easier to get them to do it all the time, because they know if you don't do it, this is what might likely happen. But beyond that, there should be a timing allocated to certain things. Let people know in the staff newsletters, safety drills are next week. Be ready for safety drills, and then let it be measured. Let it be part of the performance measurement system, so that they know if you don't carry out your safety drill, or your students don't know what to do your safety drill, then you need to explain yourself. Not punitively, not everything should be punitive, but the children need to know. Your safety equipment, for example, and we have fire safety that comes around once in a year, and so they recertify our fire extinguishers every year. They take it out, calibrate it, fill it up, and bring it back. So again, that is something that needs to be put into your school safety procedures and policies. Yes, it is very important that is put in place, right? But most importantly, the team needs to know what to do. It can be a joke, it can be play, but it needs to be done. Also, you need to ask yourself, where are my youngest students? Are they upstairs? Are they downstairs? So we need to look at those sort of things, because if there is a safety drill that needs to happen, how easy is it to carry children at a certain age, at a certain age, out of the building? So those are things that we need to look at. We can look at those balcony slides, such that you can hook the slide on the balcony and the children can slide down instead of trying to climb, because when they're afraid, it's more difficult to climb down. And again, we talked about the age of certain children, right? So we need to make safety as practical as possible, and we need to include the parents as well. Let them understand the fact that this safety is not just school safety. At home as well, you need to be doing these things so that the children, it's nothing new when they see it in school, because you're also doing it at home. And of course, that's somewhere the PTA or the Parents and Teachers Forum can come in as well. Yeah, back to you.
I said that was the last question, but there's a last. And it's around school pickup and drop off. So a lot of people feel drop off is just drop off. It's just to drop off. But then pickup is the most important part of the day. So you see carpool, people just drop off and just leave. But so what I want to just give a shout out or some tip for securities and those responsible for carpool. What should they look out during drop off? And I asked this question because I just remembered quickly while you were talking that a school mentioned how a security man was the one that noticed that a different car came to drop a child, and he thought this is not the car that usually dropped. And the person took note of it and just mentioned that, well, no, this is not supposed to be my business, but this school, this child, since I've known this family, is the color of car. Maybe they've changed their car, but it looked different. And then they checked and realized that there was something off with it. There was some kind of abuse on the child, the driver and the child, something, and then they switched cars at the mechanic. And so when they tried all that, they realized there's an abuse going on. And so when they got to the mechanic around the area, the car broke down. So they had to bring a different car. So just by spotting a color of a car, they found an abuse happening to a child. So a little just tip to those that do carpool, it's not just about drop off, also not about pick up, sorry. Drop off is also very important. So what should they look out for?
Yeah, that's so important. I'm happy that you mentioned that. We should also look out for the people who are dropping off the children. When we have nannies being changed frequently, we should make a note of it, because that in itself means that the child is not very secure, because stability is compromised. We should also, look at the child when they come down. Some children come down, they're like, ouch, what's wrong with you? You say, oh, somebody hit me, who hit you? Those sort of things should be monitored. But really, we should be intentional and just keep our eye open, not just at drop-off, but at pick-up as well. Like you mentioned, people don't really take, more cognizance during drop-off, because usually it's the parents dropping off, but also the time, right? Do you have a sign-in method? For example, if the child left home at 7 o'clock and they're 15 minutes away from the school, maximum if there's traffic, maybe it should take them 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. But if they're coming to school 1 hour later, that should raise a flag, right? So those are some of the things that we need to put in place. Say, why did it take you so long to drop my child off at school? So that they know that they're being monitored if the parent couldn't drop off and has left the nanny or the driver to drop off the children. Also, at every point in time, depending on the age of the child, this is personal, I don't believe that children should be left alone with a driver, especially either male or female. It doesn't have to be gender specific, to be honest, right? But there should always be somebody else in the car. Just because when one person doesn't have, there needs to be those balances, those accountability system checks, exactly, for the sake of the children. And then, of course, at drop-off, there needs to be a method that governs picking up the children. Something that we do in a lot of schools that I consult for and work with is that if a parent cannot be the one to pick up the child, there should be a system where you have a code, where that code is known to the parents and to the school, and that person needs to have that code. Sometimes it's not just the card. It's very easy to do a card. Just copy the template and laminate it. It's quite easy to do that. But code systems, checking who's coming to pick up. I don't know this person. Calling the parent and say, "Oh, this person came to pick up your child. Are you aware?" So intentionality on the part of the school, and not just the admin team, but even the teachers as well, to say, "Oh, I noticed this." The guards, like you mentioned, but that aligns with your training question. If they're not trained to look out for certain things, then they're not even aware that they need to look out for it. So it all sort of ties together. And if we do that, then we truly are putting the child right in the middle where they need to be. And we'll have the right system surrounding them to keep them safe. Yeah.
Thank you. And like I said, it's very funny how the conversations all seem to come together, because our last guest also mentioned the fact that not leaving kids with either driver or whatever, it's no gender specific. At any time, there's always somebody watching, and also for parents to keep an eye on their children. Or don't say because the male driver and is a male child, then they are fine, or it's the female nanny and the female child, then they are fine, because any gender can actually abuse any gender. So I like that you also brought that at the end, and we're really grateful, and thank you for your time. Thank you
so much. All right, bye.
Okay, everyone, we have come to the end of today's session. It's been amazing. This episode was about school safety. And if you follow through from the beginning to the end, you realize that some of the things that Mr. Ajayi spoke about, Mrs. Rokeposh also spoke about, and so school safety and home safety sort of kind of come together. And so if you're a parent, you're at school, this is a good time to go back, watch home safety, come back, watch school safety, marry them together. And if you're a teacher, go back and watch the conference, learn a few things, take notes, and see how you can help your work become better. And if you're a parent, how you can become a safety savvy parent, or a teacher, a safety savvy teacher. We have more episodes coming your way, but before I go, I'd like to say thank you to Beyond the Classroom for hosting us, and the Mastercard Foundation for sponsoring this conversation. Until our next episode, it is Raquel Daniel, and it's goodbye from me.